Sup, I'm Evil Squeegee, and today I'm here to talk about the basics of getting ready for a race. The first thing you're going to want to do when you decide to start building for a race, aside from deciding whether or not you're going to want to be the first person to clear a zone, or be the first person to maximize the amount of XP for your class, or what have you, you're also going to want to keep in consideration when choosing your class the kind of competition you'll be encountering in that class. For example, this video is being recorded just before the release of the Duelist patch. Before the release of the Duelist patch, the Duelist had the minimum amount of people playing it by comparison to the other classes, and therefore there were fewer people in competition for maximum XP in that class. In the top 10 or so, there were just less people playing the class, and so there was less competition. Whereas just shortly after the Duelist class patch is going to be released, there's going to be a lot more people playing Duelist and so on. Once you've decided what kind of a class you want to be playing, though, the primary thing to consider when you're making that decision is what skills you want to be using. For example, the Marauder and the Templar both have access to Ground Slam very early on, whereas the Shadow and Ranger both have access to Poison Arrow and Fire Trap, which are very effective racing skills, which also in that same patch I just noted are going to be slightly nerfed for racing, so we'll have to see how that turns out. After you've made your choice and you know what kind of skills you want to be using and what class you want to be using them on, you need to consider the advantages that your decision has granted you. For example, a weapon-based character, such as a Ground Slam Marauder, is going to have a much better time if he gets a better weapon. He can take greater advantage of the RNG that he's been given in loot, and he can benefit more from his weapon and potentially out-DPS a caster if the RNG gods are with him. Whereas if you're a spellcasting character, such as a Freezing Pulse character, or to a lesser extent, a Poison Arrow Fire Trap character, you don't actually have as much concern for your weapon, aside from perhaps a weapon that gives plus levels to gems equipped, because the majority of the damage you're dealing is going to come from the level of the gem in question that you're using as opposed to the equipment that you're wearing. As far as that's concerned, that'll affect your gameplay later on as you spend a little more time holding back to level up your gems than you do pushing forward to get to the new zones for the better weapons faster. Once you've decided what sort of skills you're going to be using, you're going to have an easier time determining what kinds of stats you want to be using in that build. For example, I prefer to race, as you can see, as a Ground Slam Marauder. You'll forgive me, the footage here is choppy for some reason. I need to fix that. Anyways, the Ground Slam Marauder benefits from having a very high health pool, some resists, mace damage specifically, and I can start planning out the early nodes in my build. This, for the record, is one of the few times when your choice of class does impact your character's play more so. When you're building in a permanent league, you're actually looking more towards a scenario wherein the choice of class is simply a matter of point efficiency in the latter stages of the build, whereas here it defines pretty much everything available to you in the passive tree for the majority of the race, if not the entirety of the race. That being said, the important things to note is that defensive stats will allow you to pull greater packs of mobs and give you a larger margin of error if you're not as certain about controlling your character and surviving, whereas more offensive nodes will generate a character who can kill faster, thus gaining more XP, but require more skill on the part of the user and more vulnerability to things like desync. It is also worth noting in the case of melee characters, offensive stats will kill Brutus faster, but defensive stats will also let you face tank Brutus more, and so you will spend less time running in circles waiting for your medium life flask to heal you over time, and that could potentially result in a faster Brutus kill overall. Anyways, play, see what you like, see how it feels, and go from there. Once you know what stats your character is going to be needing, the most important stat of any racing character ever, in my opinion, is movement speed. The reason for this is because, generally speaking, as a Ground Slam Marauder, I spend less time farming XP in any given zone and more time moving to the next zone and killing as I go along. We'll get into the more detailed reasons for that in a later video. For now, the basic idea is that more time spent running between packs of monsters is less time spent killing those monsters, and less time killing monsters means less time getting XP. And the goal is to get XP, so we want as much movement speed as we can possibly manage. Unfortunately, the Marauder doesn't have a whole ton of movement speed in his passive tree, but the Shadow, I believe, does have some very early on. As does the Duelist. I haven't actually touched the Duelist tree in so long I couldn't tell you. However, that being said, the next thing is to know what kind of weapons and gear you're going to want to see drop. Of course, everybody's going to want to be seeing plus life gear and plus move speed boots drop. However, this can be more specific to your build As in my case, since I have focused primarily on practicing and learning the information regarding a Grand Slam Marauder, I'll be using that as an example here. The most important element of a Grand Slam Marauder is what weapon they're using. You want to get a two-handed weapon as soon as you can. That means you need to know which two-handed weapons are available, and you'll also need to know where they can drop, and that way you'll be able to determine how soon you should be able to get them, so you can start to feel out more if you're lagging behind a weapon drops. If you're getting really bad RNG, you might have to compensate that by a trip to the vendor, or perhaps you'll understand more which weapons are fantastic, so you know when your RNG is really good so you can push more. Now, all of this information is available in the wiki, and I've only done the research for this one build, but I'll show you how I did it and how I came to the conclusions that I did so that you can more effectively understand how to make these decisions for your own builds personally. The first thing I did was I noticed that my build focused on Ground Slam, which required me to be using a mace or a staff. Maces and staves here. We'll go with maces. The first mace that I've got access to is a Driftwood Maul. This is a level 3 item. This means that this item can drop off of any white level monster in a level 3 or higher zone, or because magic monsters actually drop item level 1 higher and rares drop 2 higher, I could potentially get that Driftwood Maul off of Hillock or off of a magic mob in the terraces, a rare in the terraces, I believe. I forget if the terraces is level 2 or level 1. Either way, you get the idea. The important part here is that the Tidal Maul can only drop off of white mobs in the rocky climb and forward. And the mallet can only drop, I believe, in coves, which is level 12 zone. I could be wrong. You could actually get it sooner than that. But the point is I can start to feel out where these things are going to drop. In addition, I should also be wary about stabs. Stabs can also function for my Ground Slam, so if I don't happen to have a Maul, I can get a staff, and this, having a wider array of weapons that are available to me, helps combat the RNG a little more so that I can more reliably race. However, it is worth noting that in this case, just like with the Tribal Maul, the second tier of stabs, the primitive staff, requires me to have int. The Tribal Maul requires me to have 35 strength. Now, both of these stats are higher than what my Marauder will have naked, which means that I either need to have gear, the most reliable way to get plus strength in your gear setup, or plus int in your gear setup, is to use the Lapis or Amber amulets, which can drop in various zones. Or you could purchase them off the vendor if you really need to. Or, in the case of strength, because I am a Marauder, there are plenty of strength nodes that I can pick up, and I can now verify that I should be around level 6 going through the rocky climb, perhaps level 7, so level 6 or level 7 is where I have the potential to pick up a Tribal Maul, so that's where I should start investigating the potential of perhaps wearing an Amber Amulet, or spending my next passive point on strength in order to equip the better weapon sooner, so that I can plow through the earlier content easier and spend more of my time on later content than earlier content, which is the way that we maximize the amount of XP we get while racing. That being said, you can find all of that information about those weapons, about all the weapons and what item levels they are and where you can find them can be easily turned into usable information. You simply need to have a list of monster zones, and I will actually supply a list of those in the description below. I'll link to it so that you can see what monster levels are in the various zones. So then you can compare that to the wiki for the item levels and the gear. This has been Evil Squeegee discussing the basics of planning out a race build and race tactics to come on later, hopefully in another video. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. I'll catch you next time.